Welcome, everyone. Other participants are still coming in, so let's just wait for a bit and then we can start in a while. Okay, a pleasant day to everyone. So it's a good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone. Welcome to the sub-theme on transforming the aid system to be more just and sustainable. Before we start, I'll just share some reminders for everyone. So just please put your name and organization on the chat box. Your country as well, if you're in the chat box. And there will be moments to ask questions or share insights and comments, but you can also use the chat box if not everyone will be having the chance to speak. But rest assured, the organizers will collect your insights, comments, and questions. Also, I would like to remind everyone that this session will be recorded. So please, throughout the 60 minutes that we have, we will try to finish in 60 minutes. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Raise your hand if you want to speak. Remote simultaneous interpretation is available. I think we were able to see that in the plenary earlier. So there is a balloon notification there. You can choose the language. You can also mute the original audio if you want to listen to your interpreters only. Okay, so I hope everyone is settled and excited to be in this forum. So we have around 15 participants for this session. Can we just quickly see each other? Get acquainted with all the participants here if you're comfortable with that. And so shall I please start with Sheila? If you can just say hi. Naomi, if you can just say hi and just show us yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Naomi Ayot Oyaro. I'm the chairperson for Charter for Change Working Group in Uganda. I'm happy to be part of this session. Over to you.
Thank you, Naomi. We also have Boy Mordeno. We also have Buboy Mendoza.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm glad to be part of
Henry Muyan.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Henry Myanje. I'm the country representative for Street Child, and good to be here.
Welcome. Thank you. Jamil.
Hello. Good morning, good afternoon. This is Jamil Abdo. I'm from Tamdeen Youth Foundation at Yemen. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Jenny from Oxfam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny. I'm from Oxfam, Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you. Jo Villanueva.
Hi, everyone. This is Jo Villanueva from Oxfam in Asia.
Thank you. Krishna.
Hi, everyone. I'm Loy of BALAOD, Mindanao.
Thank you, Loy, and welcome. Mary Lou.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Mary Lou. I'm from Oxfam. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Lou. We have Nen from GIA.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. I'm Nen. I'm the program coordinator for Humanitarian International Assistance based here in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you, Nen, and welcome. Normie.
Hello, good afternoon.
Thank you, Normie. Welcome. Ritz Lee.
Hi, everyone. Ritz here from BALAOD, Philippines.
Thank you. We have Ashutosh Day.
My name is Ashutosh Day, Head of Sub-Office, Oxfam, Bangladesh. Actually, we are implementing Rohingya refugee program in Cox's Bazar. So I am based in Dhaka, but frequently visiting Cox's Bazar to implement the Rohingya emergency response. Thank you very much.
Thank you and welcome day. Sheila Tapa.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Sheila Thapa. I'm from Debrox, Nepal. I look after livelihood and entrepreneurship in Debrox, Nepal.
Thank you, Sheila. Welcome. We have Marlena from Kaabay.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Hello, Marlena. Good afternoon. Again, welcome everyone for this afternoon session. I hope everyone is already settled. So in this session, we will be listening to the challenges and prospects on making headway towards localization in the Philippines. On the other hand, I would also like to encourage everyone to share your ideas and experiences as humanitarian actors. We would really want to hear your stories. So towards the end of the session, as I already mentioned earlier, we will have an open forum. So if you have along the way some questions for our panelists, please note them down and we will save it up for later. We will try to have time for the question and answer. So moving forward, we are delighted to be graced by 3 panelists who have been in the development work for a decade or two. Our first panelist will be sharing about challenges and prospects of localization in the Philippines. Ritz Santos III is a social activist and human rights defender. He is currently the executive director of BALAOD Mindanao, a legal resource institution working with the poor and marginalized sectors, identities, and local communities, and also a member of the board of the Amnesty International. Our second panelist will be sharing about the humble initiative of the Growth Project on localization. And we also have here some members of the Growth Alliance. She will be sharing more of that later. Normie has devoted her entire legal practice representing basic sectors of the communities. She is a law professor teaching international human rights law, environmental law, and agrarian reform law. Our third panelist will also be sharing about the social enterprise for organizational stability. As we all know, it is a major factor wherein the survival of Southern NGOs, as they call it, is one major issue why we have the call for localization. Buboy Mendoza, our third panelist, is the Senior Legal Officer of BALAOD Mindanao. He handles the litigation in the areas of agrarian reform, ancestral domain, environmental protection, and anti-trafficking. So without further delay, I would turn over now the floor to our first panelist. Over to you, Ritzli.
Thank you, Mali. And good afternoon, everyone. Well, good afternoon on our side of the world. And thank you, Oxfam, for this opportunity to share BALAOD initiatives towards localization here in the Philippines. We have a technical support from Loy, who would be sharing our presentation. Okay. I intend to share the BALAOD initiated and commissioned research on humanitarian localization and locally led response in the Philippines. Next slide. The World Humanitarian Summit in 2016 was recognized the systematic failures of the global humanitarian architecture and launched the Grand Bargain. 5 years thereafter, targets in reforming policy and practice quality funding, localization, reduction of reporting burdens, and other areas have not been met. The Grand Bargain emerged as a multilateral policy forum for collaboration that could build on its initial learnings. Grand Bargain 2.0 recommitted to its objectives with the recognition of the enabling priorities of better quality funding and improved support to local responders through increased engagement with affected populations. However, the localization agenda was not necessarily hinged on the grand bargain. While high-level decisions could provide sweeping reforms, profound change can be brought about through shifts in power relationships amongst international, national, local actors and affected communities towards more local humanitarian action, support, local level leadership, articulate the expected roles of intermediaries, and work with local partners to define the elements of quality partnership. As such, localization is a commitment of international actors based on what they perceive they should do for local actors. However, localization does not necessarily reflect the diverse, context-specific, and marginalized perspective of local actors. Next slide. Most local humanitarian actors here in the Philippines, at least, were first and foremost development actors, defining as local as possible, also pointed towards people's organizations that addressed a variety of issues in the community, disasters being only one of them. And yet, the push for localization and locally led response is not well known amongst local development actors. Moreover, several recommendations for locally led response are directed towards humanitarian and not inherently development actors. From a developmental perspective, the localization indicators of INGOs are not necessarily sufficient. The desired goals, the challenges faced, and the initiatives made by local development actors to lead humanitarian responses are barely elaborated. This is the framework of our research. The research is at defining localization and locally led response from the perspective of local civil society organizations and to determine the status of and challenges to localization. Next slide, please. Just very briefly, the methodology of the research, next slide, would include a rapid literature review. It was conducted to build on existing knowledge on localization and locally led response. Primary data gathering was conducted through semi-structured online interviews. Questionnaires were provided for local and national NGOs and INGOs and donors. Then purposive sampling was also conducted targeting local, national, and international responders with familiarity with the localization agenda. Respondents include 45 national and local organizations and 17 INGOs and donors, and the research was done from January to April of 2021. Next slide. The different localization dimensions explored in the study include quality funding, which means funding environment that promotes, incentivizes, and supports localization and locally led response. And second, quality partnership, which entails equitable and complementary relationship between local actors and donors, international actors, and national actors. Next slide. International humanitarian assistance had steadily increased from $18 billion in 2012 to a peak of $31.2 billion in 2018. However, well, here in the Philippines, according to Development Initiatives 2020 study. However, the total assistance has been declining because of shifts in domestic priorities of major government donors. Government assistance has dropped from $25.3 billion in 2018 to $24.2 billion in 2020. This figure shows the humanitarian assistance in US dollars billions provided by foreign governments and EU institutions based on estimates from various annual international humanitarian assistance reports. This developed despite grand bargain signatories committing to target 25% funding as direct as possible to national and local actors. This peaked at 3.5% in 2018, only to drop to 2.1% in 2019. This is equivalent to the base year of the Grand Bargain in 2015. The figure likewise shows relatively flat aid from 1991 to 1999, rising assistance from 2000 to 2011, and sharper increase from 2012 to 2018. The upward trend of international funding coincided with the increasing direct implementation of INGOs in the country. The 1990s in the Philippines was characterized by dominant locally led response through partnerships. In the 2000s, in the year of 2000s, the transition to direct implementation of INGOs with in-country presence became prominent. Direct presence of INGOs peaked during the Super Typhoon Yolanda response in 2013. This trend was called out. However, the proper platform to develop this discourse on localization was not readily available. Soon thereafter, localization discussion and collaborations between national networks towards different dimensions of locally led response were being formed together with INGO champions. Next slide. The study gathered different perceptions on basic concepts such as humanitarian action, local actors, localization, and locally led humanitarian response. Our respondents defined humanitarian action as providing aid and services to people affected by disasters, to save lives or reduce suffering. Being development-oriented, some respondents belittled the tendency of humanitarian action to only remedy symptoms. At worst, some expressed contempt over highly funded response that undermined years of community development work. Most local and national actors were unaware of the definition used in the Grand Bargain debate. Many immediately used nationality to distinguish local from non-local actors. Several respondents were tentative when asked if they consider themselves as local organizations. Some nationally registered INGOs consider themselves as local actors. Other INGOs argue that employing national staff provided them with the necessary local knowledge, commitment, and vision necessary to be considered as local actors. Some local actors perceive these actions as an unscrupulous tactic to circumvent the localization shift in funding trends. Localization involves relationship between global, national, central, or resource-rich organizations on one hand, and local organizations on the other. More specifically, localization was the quality of the partnership and the processes that address the inequalities or indifference in stature. Localization meant decentralizing resources towards enhancing the capacities of and shifting power to local actors. Meanwhile, locally led response occur when local actors are empowered to drive relevant and timely humanitarian interactions toward people-centered development. Next slide. On the next slide, I will be sharing highlights of the impediments to localization that we have gathered from our responders. First is lack of access to large humanitarian funds, which means that the increasing allocation of humanitarian funds are not necessarily accessible to local organizations. The share of local organizations closer to affected communities decreased significantly when funds pass down through multiple tiers of organizations. So that would include INGOs, national organizations, and big NGOs here in the Philippines. Second is the perceived low capacity of locals. This means that dominant international actors and to some extent national organizations define humanitarian capacity based on their own strengths. Third, resistance to shifting power balance, then lack of local voice, then poor quality of funding, which means that there are limitations and restrictions of humanitarian funding. I'm sure we know all about this. Then centralization and suppression of civil society. This is happening everywhere else in the world, well, particularly here in the Southeast Asia region, we are experiencing the shrinking of civic space, and finally, lack of quality partnership. Next slide. With the low levels of humanitarian funding, this result to limited reach and type of response, non-compliance to standards, shouldering operational costs, and limited roles in the humanitarian response. International actors compete while local actors partner up for funds. Stringent guidelines, quick proposal and report deadlines, large local counterpart requirements, imposition of various international standards, and due diligence process also deter local actors from applying for funds. Recently, applicants were compelled to form a consortium to reduce transactional costs. This required additional layers of requirements, collaboration, and partnership management. A strategic partnership revolves around long-term commitments and its impact in terms of resourcing, capacity building, influence, and collaboration. Local organizations strive to have and/or maintain relationship while INGOs value existing partnerships. Some INGOs would rather work through existing partners, though the latter might not have track record in humanitarian action. Local actors likewise experience partnership with donors limited to projects only during emergencies, although some have formal commitments with INGOs that went beyond disaster response. Next slide. As regards decreasing share of local actors and affected communities, the illustration is actually self-explanatory, showing resources used by each tier in humanitarian response. Obviously, the local actors and the affected communities share the smallest portion of the resources with the most limitations and restrictions. Next slide. Not all national actors provide the desired intermediary functions. Some national actors intrude into affected communities like INGOs conducting direct implementation. Some external actors simply base their response on rapid damage and needs assessments, which do not necessarily address root causes of vulnerabilities in the communities. Local actors are often left behind to address issues or troubleshoot loose ends of such transient invasive interventions. If intermediary roles are assumed by first-tier organizations, minimizing the tiers will likely end up with national organizations cornering funds and hindering access for most small local organizations. Next slide. Consultation and joint decision-making is important. Some local actors have experienced a partnership that did not integrate their input into the design and evaluation of a disaster response project. Some, despite having consultations, experienced subcontracting relationships wherein activities and services were detrimental or not relevant to the development of the community. Still, those who hold the purse decide, and for some instance, forced consortium muffle local voices. Visibility of local actors play a crucial role in increasing their profile to donors, demonstrating capacity and leadership, and generating networks and linkages. With their limited sphere of influence and geographical scope, local actors rely on international and national partners to widen their visibility. Some local actors admitted that they do not have humanitarian capacity development. These organizations do not have staff and humanitarian orientation or were not provided with capacity building activities. Despite this, there was no indication that they could not implement humanitarian action. Some INGOs undermine local capacity by poaching their staff. Next slide. There are some efforts from the local, some efforts from the local actors. Most local and national actors are mindful of humanitarian standards. Local organizations generally resonate with the CHS, and several networks conducted capacity building on CHS for their members, including community-based organizations. There is an evolving understanding of and capacity to comply with the CHS locally. Compliance is seen as essential since it enhances downward accountability to relevant and timely humanitarian action for an affirmation to dignify affected populations. Beyond that, it is assumed that compliance to standards provide better international recognition of the humanitarian capacity of local organizations, although low resources limit compliance to international standards. There is an increasing installation of formal organizational systems for disaster response. However, local staff sometimes find it difficult to implement proposed formal mechanisms, especially in areas involving culturally sensitive practices. Local actors often already had informal, verbal, and relational culture that allows them to effectively connect with partner communities. Other challenges include lack of resources to access organizational development consultants and the requirement to roll out systems to partner community organizations. Common areas for consultation and participation include damage and needs assessment, disaster response design, and management plans. For advocacy, local advocacies influence local response. However, advocacy is not a priority in some of the narrative of the humanitarian actions. There is a collaboration through existing networks and place-based institutions. However, networking and coordination comes with its own set of challenges. On large platforms, voices of local organizations can be drowned out. Local organizations with their limited time and resources has difficulty even in simply attending the frequent coordination meetings. Having no clear humanitarian mandate, local development organizations had internal debates about rationalizing their disaster response and to program their humanitarian capacity building. Local actors are critical of interactions that only distributed relief goods. Vulnerabilities persist and a culture of dependency develops, which undermine their community development work. Next slide. Accessing funds locally often involve mobilizing resources from the affected communities, local counterparts from survivors, and local fundraising. Existing networks have facilitated resourcing of local actors by downloading network resources to or taking on risks on behalf of local actors. An INGO employing a partnership-based approach is an essential first step to assess substantial funding for localization. Capacity building of place-based actors is the most frequently mentioned form of localization. Several actors conducted organizational development to address humanitarian capacity gaps, comply with humanitarian standards or funding policies, and adopt practices during times of emergencies. The development humanitarian nexus is widely facilitated by having a development-oriented foundation. And alternative hubs provide opportunities to update and consolidate local voices of the numerous local CSOs who are unable to regularly engage with the formal response formulations. Global solidarity around localization had been demonstrated by local and national actors through active management in the grand bargain, active engagement in the grand bargain, work streams and endorsement of the Charter for Change, and several national organizations and networks have also been active in South networks that promote or support localization. Next slide. The research recommends further humanitarian localization and locally led response by building on the strengths and learnings of local actors and their partnership with different stakeholders. Restructuring humanitarian funding around strategic partnership means focusing on the needs of local actors to provide relevant, timely, coordinated, and strategic interventions. This departs from current funding structure that focus on project defined by speed of delivery, limited timelines, wide coverage, and predetermined humanitarian modalities. Building on local leadership capacities means recognizing the identity and mandates, competencies, social capital with other stakeholders and internal government system of local organizations. With localization, the goals shift toward demanding social accountability. This demands not just downward accountability of responders, but also the social accountability of duty bearers with respect to the recovery of affected communities and reduction of the vulnerability of constituencies. And for my last slide, next slide, please. The study is a reaffirmation of BALAOD response, the growth project, and the creation of Growth Alliance Philippines, which will be explained by the next panelist. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, good evening to everyone again. Next slide, please. Aside from the localization issues discussed by Ritz a while ago, there are other challenges, next slide please, that brought about the development and implementation of the growth project and the birth of the Growth Alliance Philippines. These are, next slide, Lloyd. These are decreasing international funding competition, or even competition among NGOs, even dependency to foreign funding support. And another is lack of NGOs capacities. Based on the discussion of Ritz, there are a lot of research and discussion about the lack of NGO capacity in humanitarian response. And aside from that, especially here in the Philippines, is the increasing restriction of the government of the civil society scope for action. This organization that I am referring to a while ago, or the 6 organization, next slide please, that join forces in the implementation of the growth project, or to work together to implement the growth projects, are BALAOD Mindanao. BALAOD Mindanao is the lead organization of this project. BALAOD Mindanao is based in Cagayan de Oro, Mindanao, Philippines, working towards the legal empowerment of marginalized sectors. The other one is HIPI. HIPI is based in Surigao del Norte. Their focus is more on the increase and improve participation of the people's participation in local governance. Next one is Kaabay. Kaabay is Kalusugan Alang sa Bayan Incorporated. This organization is based in Davao City, focused more on providing a comprehensive health work program, supporting also community-based health services and health program. Another is Kasilak. Kasilak is also based in Davao, focused on upliftment of socio-economic condition of communities also to live in a peaceful and ecologically balanced environment. They are working with different municipalities and provinces in Davao areas. The fourth one is Pasak, Panaghiusa alang sa kaulagalingan o kaligwasan. Pasak is based in Agusan del Sur. This organization is guided by their mantra, total human development of indigenous peoples in Agusan del Sur for recognition and to recognize their recognition and development of and even awareness and education of indigenous people. The other one is EcoWeb. EcoWeb is based in Iligan. EcoWeb stands for Ecosystem Work for Essential Benefits Incorporated. They guided to work towards 5 goals: sustainable livelihoods, humanitarian response, equitable distribution, and protection of rights over resources, and even participatory governance. This organization is known as Growth Alliance Philippines. The project that I'm referring to a while ago is entitled, next slide please, Grassroots Organizational Development Working Towards Humanity, or Growth Project. This project is implemented or was implemented by the 6th organization with the support of the Johanniter International Assistant. Johanniter is based in Germany. The project I ran for more than 3 years. It will end this coming July, this July of 2027. The project aims to, next slide please, for 6 NGOs. Actually, this project is a regional project. The project is also implemented in Cambodia and Myanmar, but here in the Philippines, it's focused in the 6 organizations that I mentioned a while ago. The goal is for these 6 organizations to sustainably, efficiently, and effectively respond to fragility of their scope of action and even advocate to the interests of the target population. How did the 6 organizations what were our strategies to implement and to attain this goal. Next slide, please. We have 3 strategies. The first one, as mentioned by Ritzy a while, one of the problem really is lack of capacities of small NGOs like the 6 organizations. First, strengthening institutional capacities while maintaining core organizational values and work structure. Other one is lack of funding. We want to address the lack of funding or even dependency to foreign funding organizations. Is strengthening the financial independence, specifically through securing unrestricted funds to cover basic costs and enable organizational growth. And the last but not the least strategies is to contribute to the Charter for Change advocacy or advocacy and strengthening and expanding networks to better respond to external circumstances, meaning natural or man-made disasters, and promotion of the localization agenda as mentioned by Ritzy. What's the journey of these 6 organizations? We implemented the project by, next slide please. We started with assessing ourselves or assessing this organization using the community, the core humanitarian standards as guidelines. Then after that, after finding and evaluating this organization, the development and enhancement of organizational policy, they underwent several training sharing workshops on the following. Aside from CHS, they underwent community stakeholders participation workshop, development of resource-based monitoring evaluation, cash aid approaches, and of course, financial sustainability, including the development and implementation of a social enterprise. And then of course, as mentioned by Ritzy, we conducted research on localization and conducted also several discussions about localization, sharing our insights and our experiences, and of course, the conduct of National Summit last April. And because we believe on the strength of each and every organization, we also had several peer learning and mentoring sessions, not only with the consultant, but also among ourselves. And after all these activities were conducted among the 6 organizations, I would like to share some of our accomplishments. Next slide, please. Next slide, Lloyd, please. So from the activities that I have mentioned, the 6 organizations develop and even enhance their existing organizational policies. We chose some. I just want to share that they enhance and develop. First, the policies on protection against sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment. Of course, this issue is really rampant nowadays, especially during pandemic. Then they manage also to develop security management plan, and also to enhance our community participation. These 6 organizations develop also feedback complaint mechanism and other organizational policies that will help the organization to grow and to be efficient, using the core humanitarian standard as guidelines. As I have mentioned, we develop also a tailor-made resource-based monitoring evaluation plans and guidelines, and also digital software in order to make this organization efficient in their monitoring system. And also we learn, this organization also learned and identified appropriate cash aid approaches, the different approaches and learning of the Philippines, especially in the different approaches that they are applying. And then of course, in addressing the lack of funding, this 6 organizations also developed and were able to formulate a 5-year financial sustainability plan, which includes the social enterprise implementation that my colleagues will explain later, and will share further about our experience about this. And of course, not only the research, but also we studied, increase our awareness on the localization agenda, and even formulated some position papers to be shared to the public about localization. One of these, I think, one of the learnings that we had during our discussion of the localization agenda among the 6 organizations was really there was a sharing that there is really a need to have a strong duty bearers, meaning the government. The government should have mechanism and should provide efficient and effective community-led response. Meaning the duty bearers and the government should do their job and responsibilities to respond in humanitarian crisis and even disaster. Meaning to say, to lessen at least the task of international organization or humanitarian organization to fill the gaps in addressing humanitarian crisis. The Growth Alliance really parang hoping, and one of the, I think they emphasized in their position paper, is to build a self-reliance in a humanitarian response in the Philippines. By doing so and then connect with other networks in pushing for localization agenda. And then don't worry, next slide please. We will share also our experiences, our insight, because we documented everything and we want to publish it, the stories, the insight, the learning that we had during this past 3 years implementation of the GROW project. We were able to document our journey towards core humanitarian certification, the synthesis of the Growth Alliance experience. We also documented how the 6 organizations did their community participation to ensure that there was or there is community participation in local development in the Philippines. And also we had developed also a guide to cash transfer programming to guide small NGOs to implement the cash transfer programming. And also the research that Ritz discussed a while ago, we will publish that entitled Building New Strengths, a research on humanitarian localization and locally response in the Philippines. And of course, I have only 10 minutes, I cannot share everything, but Buboy also, my colleague, will also discuss, and we also put this in a document, our stories behind the social enterprise implementation of the 5 organization part of the GROW project. So that's it. I would like to call Buboy, and I think one of the strategies that that we learned from this GROW project is to make this 6 organization and other organizations financially stable through the implementation at least of one small social enterprise. The project was able to support the implementation. We're able to document this experience. And Attorney Buboy Mendoza will be the one to further share our experience, our insight, and our journey about the implementation of social enterprise. Buboy.
Hello, everyone. I will be talking about the social enterprise that the different organization undertook late last year. The social enterprise initiatives of the organizations were based on the need for small local organizations to seek various means of sourcing resources in order to continuously support their respective programs and advocacies on a sustainable basis. It was also to help generate their own available unrestricted resources to provide immediate humanitarian assistance during calamities and disasters. Apart from this, there is also the increasing frequency of strong typhoons in the Philippines, as well as worsening gravity in terms of extent of destruction, as well as area covered by calamities. Hence, more resources are needed in order to immediately respond to calls for humanitarian assistance. So the different organizations decided to engage as a means to generate their own funds via social enterprise. Next slide, please. The participating organizations were BALAOD Mindanao, which is a legal organization based in Cagayan de Oro City, doing primarily legal empowerment and advocacy work in northern Mindanao. There is the EcoWeb based in Iligan City, which is doing disaster resiliency, livelihood, and humanitarian work in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. There is also the Kaabay, which is doing community health and sanitation work in Davao del Norte. There is also this organization, Kasilak, doing livelihood and community development in many parts of Mindanao. And there is this IP organization, PASAC, which is an IP organization doing livelihood and community development of indigenous peoples in Agusan del Sur. Next slide, please. For the social enterprise that they established, as an advocacy organization, BALAOD Mindanao engaged in the production and marketing of various advocacy merchandise such as shirts, bags, mugs, face masks, notebooks, and pens, which BALAOD branded as Just Fair. Marketing these different advocacy merchandise will facilitate the involvement and participation of ordinary people in the promotion of key issues and programs promoted by BALAOD. They not only become donors and supporters of BALAOD programs, but they also become co-advocates of the different BALAOD advocacies. Next slide, please. For EcoWeb, further investments were made in their already existing abaca trading and processing station. EcoWeb is already engaged in the capability building work to upgrade the abaca farmers' production capacity and quality. So it set up an abaca trading station to buy the abaca fibers of their farmer partners and further processes these abaca fibers. They branded as green fiber and marketed them to bigger companies and abaca exporters. This initiative will help the abaca farmers to have regular market for their abaca fibers aside from the generated resources for EcoWeb. Next slide, please. In their work for community health and sanitation, on the other hand, Kaabay highly promotes the production and use of organic and agricultural health products in the communities they serve. Examples of these products are the organic red, black, and white rice varieties, virgin coconut oil, roselle tea and wine, cocoa and turmeric, among others. Inasmuch as their partner communities are already producing these organic and healthy products, Kaabay decided to participate in the marketing and distribution of these products they branded as Kanami in the cities. This initiative will not only help generate funds for the organization and for their partner communities, it will also help Kaabay promote their health advocacy to more people. Next slide, please. One of the main work of Kasilak Development Foundation is the upliftment of the socioeconomic conditions of their partner communities. Their partner community in Kidapawan, North Cabato is known for the production of high-quality coffee beans of the Arabica, Robusta, and Excelsa varieties. Kasilak has already been doing capacity building work, helping these coffee farmers produce high-quality coffee beans. For its social enterprise, Kasilak decided to participate in the marketing and distribution of the high-quality coffee beans, which they rebranded as Kasilak Kera Coffee. The endeavor will help the coffee farmers to have regular market for their coffee beans, as well as generate unrestricted funds for the organization. As for PASAC, next slide please. PASAC decided to put up a drinking water filtration station and truck hauling services to serve and address the need for clean drinking water, as well as transportation services for the farm inputs and outputs of the surrounding IP communities. PASAC happened to have a clean spring water within its property, hence the idea of distributing clean drinking water to other IP communities. The enterprise will address the need for clean drinking water and transportation of farm products, as well as generate funds for the other programs of PASAC. Next slide, please. So what were the initial experience of this different organization and their social enterprise? The challenges that they experienced was that first, the COVID-19 restrictions affected the staff's mobility in starting up their respective social enterprise, given that these enterprises were launched during the pandemic. Meeting with partner communities about products, packaging, deliveries were very limited. Another challenge is that the staff were doing the development and humanitarian work in the communities were the same people that were setting up the social enterprises of the organization. The social enterprise work was an additional responsibility to the community development work of the staff. Hence, the pace did not go as fast as it should have. Another challenge was that it also became evident that venturing into social or business enterprise require a different mindset and skill set other than that of doing the development and humanitarian work. It was a dominant recurring theme among the 5 organizations, as their staff would often have difficulty doing product promotions, marketing, and selling. Some staff had to struggle in putting markup fees on the product price or in demanding quality products from their partner farmer communities. Moreover, development staff tend to maximize all the budget for the project, while in social enterprise, one is encouraged to produce the needed output using minimal cost possible. These are the things that should be normal in a regular business enterprise. Another challenge is that at the initial phase, it was a struggle for the staff to do the financial recording and reporting, as the templates were simply different from what they have been used to in their development work. They also had to be taught and trained to do the financial recording and reporting. Finally, there was also this challenge of learning to do business online. As many of the businesses now have online facilities, the 5 organizations had to learn how to set up online advertising, online ordering, and online payment systems. Next slide, please. From the initial few months of experience, here are the learnings and insights taken by the different organizations. First, the enterprises that were established by the respective organizations were all related to their development work. BALAOD Mindanao chose to engage in marketing advocacy merchandise. EcoWeb chose to invest in the abaca trading enterprise that supports the livelihood of their abaca farmers. As a health advocate, Kaabay elected to market the organic and health products of their partner communities, in the same way that Kasilak went for the marketing of quality coffee beans produced by the communities they assist. And PASAC opted to engage in the truck hauling enterprise in drinking water as it was needed in their communities. For organizations that are new to social enterprise, going through this path may be smart and right decision because they are venturing into a business enterprise having basic relevant information of the nature of the business or product as experienced by their partner communities in their attempt to succeed in their chosen livelihood project. Second, there is a need for dedicated staff to do the social enterprise. Running a social enterprise requires a significant amount of monitoring and attention to details in every step of the process. It will help if these organizations Dedicate at least one enterprising staff to do the required tasks. Third, the business mindset and skills training required of the social enterprise is different. Organizations may have to let their concerned staff go through a certain process to facilitate the needed shift in paradigm. And just as they let their constituents go through capability building sessions, these organizations must also let their staff go through the skills training needed in the running of the social enterprise. Among the key ones are on selling, marketing, and financial recording. The setting up of online marketing platforms is necessary. It may be a significant marketing strategy if this organization invests in using online platforms in promoting and marketing the respective enterprise. This is true in as many new businesses that have grown and succeeded in recent years have resorted to online marketing platforms to help promote and market their businesses. Finally, there is wisdom in the suggestion that the 5 organizations must continue to periodically engage among themselves so they can learn from the positive and negative experiences of others in the group. Learning from these experiences, especially when there are emerging successful social enterprise models in the group, will help fast-track the improvement of others as well. But while at this, each organization may have to engage as well with other groups in their respective industries in order to learn from and grow from the experiences of others in that industry. For all too often, the wisdom and insights taken from these leaders and champions become guides and signposts in steering the enterprise to the right direction. These are the important challenges that these 5 organizations faced in establishing their social enterprise. The challenge for the creation of a business system that will deliver the quality goods to the markets that want them on a consistent basis. Come to think of it, this is the single most important challenge that the livelihoods of every community partner face over the years in their struggle towards financial sufficiency and development. Their struggle has now become the similar struggle of these 5 organizations. And should any and all of these 5 organizations succeed in the difficult journey towards building a thriving social enterprise, imagine what this organization can do as they assist and empower the respective constituent communities become financially sustainable themselves. Indeed, a true community empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you, Buboy. Thank you, Normie. And thank you, Ritz, to our panelists for walking us through how this small alliance did all these initiatives, from looking into the problems, why we are looking and why we are advocating for localization, and also within themselves strengthening that capacity of the organization, as well as looking into how it will be sustainable, because in the long run it will always be the local NGOs who will stay. So thank you for that sharing. So we have 10 more minutes for the Q&A. And please, yeah, you can also use the chat box if you do not wish to be seen or heard in this forum. But please, if you have a question, just raise your hand. But before that, before everyone loses their internet, I hope not everyone though, before someone else loses their internet due to the traffic, can we have a quick group can we have a quick group photo before we proceed to the question and answer? Can I also request the tech team to assist and let me know if the group photo is already done? Thank you. So it is now time for our Q&A. I have seen hands raised earlier. Yeah, Abu Mashud. I'm sorry, I won't be able to pronounce it correctly.
No,
Yes,
it's okay.
please.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yes, please.
As an endorser of C4C, so we are working for the localization in Bangladesh. We have a network since 2018. Actually, the first presenter, maybe Lee, he mentioned about the capacity building of local NGO in terms of localization. Actually, what our philosophy says, we don't mention capacity building of the local NGO. We always mention the capacity enhancements of the local NGO, because sometimes the INGO and the signatory of Charter for Change and Grant Bargaining, they use it as a tools to undermine our capacity. So whenever we say capacity, because every INGO, local NGO, local NGO CB have their own capacity, own philanthropy, own indigenous knowledge, how to navigate the humanitarian response. So this is one thing. Another thing is the mapping is very important, stakeholders mapping and beyond, because we always give emphasis to the stakeholders, means some key stakeholders, but there is just some community, those who are affected community, they are also in part of the stakeholders. So we always think, and one thing is that whenever we talk about the localization, what about the governance system and policy of the signatories of the C4C and Grant Bargaining, whether they will change their policy in line with the grant bargaining or localization system. This is very important. Unless they change their policy or their strategic plan that local leadership will develop in humanitarian response, and they will follow this agenda of grant bargaining and the Charter for Change. This is very important unless they change. And one thing we observe that in our country level, that sensitization in the country level is very important, because in the their head office level, lots of their chief executive knows about the localization. But when we approach in the country level, because they don't know, even they don't hear about the localization, but they don't know about the grant bargaining charter. So sensitization is very important in this regard. So far, I think when we will talk about the localization, so it is very important. So I think we are the same South-based organization, our same goal, our is actually a common voice is the local. How can we actually, and one more interesting thing is that though our neighbor Nepal is actually, they are a bit advanced in terms of localization, government has endorsed their policy almost few, but we have to raise voice and go for that advocacy to convince the government. Unless they endorse this localization movement, it's very difficult for us to move ahead. So this is our common voice should be that government have to be acknowledged, because as you know, the global fund is shrinking everything. So how can we actually go for the local? It's very challenging right now for us. So thank you very much. It's a nice presentation from the Philippines, and I think we should also accountable the INGO, the partner NGO, also accountable to the affected community. They also they always talk us that you must be accountable to us, to the INGO or UN, but why not they are accountable to the affected community? This is also very important for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abu. That's a very good point. The changing of strategies of the LGU when it comes to addressing humanitarian response is a very, very crucial point that needs to be addressed and even discussed here in the Philippines, because for some negotiations and discussions, it becomes sometimes like a power play between LGUs or the NGOs, when in fact the victims are actually should be the one that should be given more priority in this kind of discussion. So thank you, Abu. Okay, there seems to be none. We are actually right on time. We were given an extra 15 minutes for this discussion. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope that in the coming discussion on localization, be it local, be it global, we will continue this discussion, because this is why we exist. This is why we do our work. We always want to protect our community. That's why we always aim to be better. We call for other stakeholders to be with us in doing better in our job, so that we can be together with our community, protected and safe. Thank you, everyone. And I think it's now time to go back to the plenary.